I'm only okay if this happens. Hey everybody, it's Tim Shurr. Welcome to the podcast. I am driving to do a leadership program, a mesmerizing leadership program out of town. And so if you hear the busyness behind me, that is the highway. So I'm on a road trip, so that means podcast time. Here's the question. What's going on inside the minds of top achievers that cause them to make extraordinary breakthroughs both personally and professionally? My name is Tim Shurr, and I invite you to join me as we take a deep dive into the unconscious mind and discover how to transform your biggest dreams into a reality. Welcome to the How to Be Mesmerizing podcast. So welcome back, everybody. Okay, so here's the deal. A lot of times we are walking around with these rules in our head, these ideas that tell us that if certain things don't go the way that we think they should go, then that means that we're unhappy, right? Then that means that we have to be scared. That means that we have to be frustrated. That means that we have to be angry. That means that we have to be upset. And the person creating these rules in your head are you, or you might have adopted these rules from the people who raised you. However, you're the one who's still supporting and reinforcing them because they're in your head. Now, a lot of times these rules are unconscious. A lot of times people think that they're just reacting to whatever's going on in front of them, like any normal person would, and that is actually not the case. You know, everybody has a different response to the challenges in front of us. And so our goal is to make sure that we recognize that we each have the ability to decide how we're going to respond in any moment. There are so many things happening around us and happening within us that are out of our control. And that's where the serenity prayer came into play. You know, God, please give me the strength to control the things that I can control, to let go of worrying about the things that I can't control, and to have the wisdom to know the difference, all right? Because you simply cannot control things that are out of your control. Like, you can't control the weather. You can't control how somebody else is going to respond. You can't control the traffic. You know, when you're playing a sports game, you can't control what the other team is going to do, okay? And so what we do have control over is how we respond to whatever's happening in the present moment. So much of the time we're in our head worrying about what might happen in the future instead of focusing on what we can do in the present to cultivate a future that feels more empowering or in alignment with what we want. Or we spend so much time thinking about what happened in the past. And there's nothing you can really do about the past except learn from it, grow from it, and then use that knowledge in the present to feel more secure, to create more variety, to feel more significant, to feel more love and connection, to be able to contribute in a higher way. You know, I have lots of people who come to me and say, you know, I'm unhappy because of whatever it is that they feel they cannot control. I'm unhappy because of how my parents were. I'm unhappy because of how my spouse is. I'm unhappy because of my career, right? And how my boss treats me. These are all things outside of our control. However, we can have influence over these things. You can change your way you communicate with people. I mean, if you're thinking about things that happened in the past, you can't change that, but you can learn from it. You know, you can recognize that people will teach you useful ways for how to be and how not to be. And you can learn from both and take that wisdom and apply it to your present moment. So you can ask yourself, all right, I've seen examples of how to be and how not to be. So how can I use that right now to cultivate a feeling of peace inside? How can I use that to go from fear to faith, right? Or in business, I've been through ups and downs. In anybody in business, especially if you're an entrepreneur, you've been through ups and downs constantly and learned from them, right? So what have you learned from this, and how can you apply this in your future moving forward? And so if you keep focusing on how you can learn from any situation instead of emotionally getting wrapped up in whatever's happening, instead of getting caught up in the idea that my rules are being violated right now. Somebody is behaving in a way that makes me feel like I can't be happy or peaceful in this situation. If you can recognize that it's the rules that are bothering you, that are keeping you stuck, not the person's behavior, it gives you tremendous freedom from having to react in the moment the way that you always have. People often say, I tell myself I'm going to be more calm in this situation, and then I'm in the situation for 3 seconds and I'm immediately doing everything I said I wasn't going to do. And that's because you've practiced it so much that you're so good at it, right? That it's become an automated response. It's a habit, right? It's just a habit. But we can break our habits by not reinforcing them. In psychology, it's called extinction, right? If you don't reinforce it, then it fades away. And so what we want to do is start to control our responses or our reactions with our breathing first. Control your breathing, control your life. So if you find yourself in a situation where you might get upset, because you typically do, then what you do is you take a few slow power breaths. You breathe in through your nose, down to your belly, then you slowly exhale. You do that at least 5 times in a row. That stimulates your relaxation response. Then so what I recommend you do is you practice this before you're in a future situation. So you stimulate the relaxation response, and then you focus on, all right, how do I want to respond? Now, before you focus on how you want to respond, I want you to try to feel the stress or feel the anxiety or feel the anger come up before you switch to the desired response, because that's what often trips people up. They say, I'm going to feel calm, or I'm going to stay calm in this situation. Let's say with your spouse, I'm going to stay calm in this situation, or with your employee, or with your boss, I'm going to stay calm in this situation. And then as soon as I get in that situation, I start to feel stressed, and then I lose it. Okay. So what we want to do when we imagine feeling more calm in that situation is we start with the stress feeling first, because that's probably going to be the first emotion you experience in that situation. So we want to start with the unuseful feeling and then use it to shift into the more useful feeling. So I hope you're following me with this, because if you don't do it that way, the mistake that a lot of people make is they just try to imagine themselves calm in that situation, and it doesn't work very well, because in that situation, you're going to feel those stressful feelings. Oops, hang on one second. Looks like I have to get off here. Okay. All right, so you're going to use those stressful situations, or you're going to experience those stressful feelings. And so what we need to do is make sure that we get in touch with those feelings first, and then use them to shift into the more empowering feeling. Okay, so you got to start with the uncomfortable feeling first, and then shift into the more empowering feeling. And that is how you set yourself up for success, that one distinguishing factor. Because again, if you don't start with the uncomfortable feeling and you just try to imagine yourself being calm in that situation, when you're actually in that situation and you feel that uncomfortable feeling, that's what trips the old response. So we're going to set it up in your mind so that that old response actually trips the new response. And that little distinction is what makes this work. Okay, so with that said, you would take a few power breaths in, then you would imagine maybe trying to access that feeling of stress in that situation. What is the thing that violates your rules, right? Is it a look that somebody gives you? Is it a tone in their voice? Is it how they hold their body? Is it what you think they are suggesting about you? So if they say, didn't you get this done? In your mind, does that mean they think you're incompetent? Does that mean they are saying that you're less than as a human being? I mean, we get all kinds of ideas and rules in our head. When somebody says, did you get this done? It could literally just mean, did you get it done? I don't know if you did or not. But people have these insecurities that cause them to feel, what, are you doubting me as a human being? Are you saying that I'm less than as a person? It's like, no. I was just wondering if you got this thing done or not, right? But if we have these rules inside, which believe me, we all have these rules that keep us stuck and unhappy, then, it's our job not to get them to ask the question differently. Our job is to change our response, change our interpretation of it. Okay, and so by doing so, it makes you feel much happier, and you are actually in control. You're actually finally in control in these situations, instead of feeling like you're at the mercy of your rules and your interpretations. So imagine yourself feeling stressed. Now, another little trick to make this work, don't do your power breathing while you're trying to imagine getting upset, because it won't work. Power breathing makes you feel calm, which is why it's so awesome, which is why I teach it all the time. But in order to feel anxiety or stress or anger, you got to breathe through your mouth. Okay, so be aware of that the next time you get stressed. You'll notice you're holding your breath or you're breathing through your mouth. So in this particular activity, you have to breathe through your mouth in order to start to feel those upset feelings. So again, let me go through this so it's nice and simple. So you're going to think about a situation where you'd like to respond in a more empowering way. Then think about how you typically respond. Start breathing through your mouth and notice what is it that happens that causes you to get upset. Now, a lot of times we're not really aware of this. This is a blind spot you might have, or this is something that we're not usually aware of, what triggers us, what pushes our buttons. And so in this situation, you simply imagine yourself in a situation where somebody is upsetting you, which actually is false. You're allowing yourself to feel upset, and you're telling yourself it's because somebody else is doing A, B, or C. Okay, so if you own the situation, instead of saying, you make me so mad, and you change it to, I am feeling mad because this is how I'm interpreting the situation. Okay, because when you give me that certain look, it brings up feelings inside of me of guilt or shame, or that somehow I'm bad because that's the same look that my mother used to give me. Okay, and that's the feelings that came up when I was little, because I didn't understand any better, or my mother did a lousy job of helping me understand, what the point of what she was doing was, or what her intentions were, or maybe she was just immature in that moment, doing the best she could, and she didn't realize that she was doing things that was going to cause you to have therapy, when you were in your 40s or 50s. So anyway, that's how you own the situation, because if you do not own the situation, if you do not take responsibility for how you feel, then that means you can't control it. You can't escape it. You are a slave to your feelings, to your programming, to your past. And that's false. That's a false story. Okay? But if you don't own it, then you get stuck. And sometimes people don't want to own it because they feel, empowered by feeling sad. It meets our need to feel significant, or our need for connection. And that might sound strange, but a lot of times feeling sorry for ourselves or getting angry is a resource strategy. Not a very good one, but it works, right? So it's effective, but it creates a lot of pain. Like pain is a short-term motivator. It works, but it's very short-term, and it leads to more problems. So you getting angry all the time in the moment might make you feel powerful. It might cause other people to back down. It might allow you to get out of a situation that's making you feel anxious or insecure, but it's very short term. It just creates more problems, more mistrust, more unhappiness. Same thing with, having a pity party and feeling sorry for yourself, feeling like everything's unfair and life's unjust, and, nobody treats you the way that they're supposed to, and then everybody's a jerk except you, and then that just causes you to isolate yourself, to mistrust everybody, and it creates more of the same unhappiness. So instead, we're going to take, accountability. We're going to be responsible for the situation, which means that we are able to respond. That's all it means. It doesn't mean that you have to own anybody else's actions, and it doesn't give everybody else a pass. It doesn't mean that their behavior is okay or acceptable or appropriate. It doesn't mean that at all. But if you can't change somebody else's behavior, then you must focus on the one person that you can influence, and that's you. And through the years, I've also learned that if you own the situation and you focus on influencing yourself, that actually does influence the behavior of those around you. When I'm ever having challenges with my wife, when I focus on how I'm responding to however she's feeling, when I focus on how I'm responding and what I can do to respond in a way that's going to meet both of our needs, that's going to help her feel heard and validated, and at the same time help me feel empowered, then it goes way, way, way better than if I get mad or if I get sucked into a pity party where I feel like I'm being, my feelings are getting hurt. Okay? If I stand in my power and just become very aware of what I'm saying in my head and how I'm responding, and I intentionally get present in the moment and listen and validate her, and then focus on what is the outcome that I want to create right now instead of what's just happening. If I focus on what's the outcome I want to create, which is usually to help her feel love, which my acronym for love is LUV, listened to, understood, and validated. When I do that, it goes really, really well. And when I don't, which I don't all the time because I'm not perfect, and so it gives me the opportunity to keep trying and practicing until I get so good at it that it becomes a habit, right? When I do this, then it goes well. And when I don't, then it just creates conflict and anxiety and unhappiness. And so that's the penalty for not being mindful, not being intentional. It's the humans, a way of, suffering is our way of getting feedback that how we're thinking and behaving and approaching situations is not the best way. It's not the most useful way. So, okay, so let's circle back. So when you're thinking about this situation, breathe through your mouth, try to hold your body tight, try to focus on looking at the ground and imagining what is it that triggers you. Is it a certain look, a certain sound, a certain feeling, a tone of voice, body language, an accusation that you think you're hearing, or maybe it is an accusation, right? But you don't have to respond to it. You don't have to feel like, if somebody has an accusation that you're a banana, what if you heard that your partner or your friend is calling you a banana behind your back? Oh, she's just a banana. He's a banana. How would you respond? It's like, you calling me a banana? I'm not sure how to respond. I guess I'd be like, why are you calling me a banana? Okay, so, which is a good question. Why would you be calling me that, right? What's driving that? What's behind that? Maybe I should go find out and come from a place of curiosity instead of anger, right? Or confronting them. Instead, just come from a place of curiosity. Hey, I heard that you're saying I'm a banana. Do you know why? Did I hurt your feelings in some way? Or, are you feeling upset or angry with me? Or, I'm just curious why you would say that. Okay. Now, a couple of things there. One, if someone calls you a banana, it's going to feel like neutral, because that seems so silly. Who cares if they call you a banana, because it doesn't make you one, right? If someone calls you a banana, does that make you one? No. And so, if somebody calls you anything else, does that make you one? No. Okay, so that's lesson number one. Lesson number two is if you go and shift your state and approach them, that's lesson two. Actually talk to the person and have a conversation. Most human beings are terrible at that. We'd rather avoid it like the plague or confront and yell and scream. Okay, so we either are indirect, so we're not going directly to the source and sharing what's really going on, or we're not compassionate. Okay, we don't have any empathy, and as a result, it comes across harsh or brutal, and that immediately shuts down effective communication and causes an argument, a fight, and people just reacting back and forth like they do. So people are going to fight or flee. But if you come across where you're direct, honest, and compassionate, you come across with curiosity, which is a different approach, right? When you come from a place of curiosity, you just want to understand, right? And that creates the conversation and it allows the dialogue to continue, which is exactly what we want. So, in that situation then, you would not only come from a place of curiosity, but you would also have that conversation with them. And when you're coming from a place of curiosity, then you're seeking first to understand, then be understood. Seek first to understand where they're coming from, then be understood. It's like playing cards. if you really want to do well, then it's best to try to figure out what the, your other player, the cards of your other player, right? Because you already know what your cards are, so you need to figure out what the cards of the other player are. Let me give you another example. When you're negotiating a deal, you really want to know what the other person wants and why, what's really driving them, because you already understand what's driving you, so you need to figure out what's driving them first. You need to understand what's going on inside of them, and then you can respond. But when people are having an argument or a loud discussion, then they're often only explaining their side of it. They're only showing their cards. They're only sharing what's driving them. They're not focusing on what's driving the other person or why. And it's such a mistake, and it's what causes almost all the arguments, because we're not seeking to understand what the intentions were of the other person. Instead, we are falsely assuming that we already know. And those assumptions, remember, assumptions make an ass out of you and me, to assume. And so when we want to create more powerful dialogue, then your goal is to definitely find out where the other person's coming from. And that goes a long way to, loving them, listening to, understanding, and then validating where they're coming from, and then sharing where you're coming from. And that will keep the conversation going. Now, just a little caveat on this. Sometimes you will validate other people, and then depending on that person and who they are, they might feel validated and then end the conversation. There are certain people where they will get their needs met and then they're good. They'll vent and vent. They'll call you up and vent and vent and vent, and then say, all right, well, I got to go. And then you're like, whoa, wait a second, I didn't get to vent. Okay, so in those situations, you got to make sure that you take charge of the conversation. And so you can direct the conversation with the questions that you ask. You can direct the conversation by the way that you are approaching this person, being more honest and upfront and direct. You can control the conversation by interrupting, and then sharing your point of view as well. Okay, so that people understand that they're not going to just dump on you and disappear. That's not going to be tolerated. If they're doing that right now, it's because you're allowing it, and you can change that, right? And so a lot of times we just get frustrated, we hang up the phone, and then we complain about it to someone else instead of dealing directly with that person. And that's a lousy way of approaching it, right? But that's your way of avoiding conflict, because you might think in your mind, yeah, well, I already know how this person's going to respond, and I already know this and that. Those are your justifications for you to not have to step out of your comfort zone and own the situation. So, all right, so we're going to circle back again, because I know I'm laying a lot on you here, but this is all good stuff. So again, if you focus on what you can do in that situation, so again, breathe through your mouth, try to feel those anxious feelings, notice what triggers you, and then take a power breath in, or a few. Start power breathing, and then ask yourself, all right, what's the outcome that I want? How do I want to feel? How do I want to respond? What can I focus on that's going to help me feel better? And then instead of staring at the ground, stare up towards the sky, up towards the ceiling, up towards God. Look up instead of down. Relax your shoulders, do your power breathing, and then ask that power question. All right, what is the outcome that I want? I want to feel more calm. I want to feel more resourceful. I want to feel more loving. I want to have more empathy. I want to be more curious in this situation and understand where they're coming from. Okay, and so, all right, well then what would I have to do in that situation? Well, I guess I would just have to ask myself that question, because then that would actually redirect my brain. It'd redirect my thoughts onto, asking a different question of them. And so it all comes back to, directing how you're thinking by asking yourself more empowering questions. So as you ask yourself these empowering questions, then all of a sudden you can imagine yourself feeling more calm, responding in a new way, and then imagine getting the outcome that you want. And that'll start to make you feel more peaceful. Now, the next step in this exercise is to imagine that you're not getting the outcome that you want, that maybe you're getting a couple different reactions from them, and then imagine yourself staying resourceful regardless of those different reactions that you're getting, so that you'll keep imagining in your mind, no matter how they react, you are still responding in the way that empowers you, and really in a way that gives them the ability to feel empowered as well, right? Because you can imagine yourself being empowered by shutting them down, right? But that's not going to create the ultimate response that you want, because you want to create a win-win situation as much as possible, because you'll walk away feeling a sense of peace, and the next time you're around that person, there will be more peace, or the relationship can be stronger, right? Or at least the person understands now that you're going to communicate with them by a different set of rules and standards, and if they don't want to live up to that, then you're not going to be talking to them very much, if at all, right? There are some people that just, are not going to change or want to grow, and if they don't, then you got to consider whether you want them in your life that much, right? Regardless of who they are, you got to put boundaries in place. And if some people are just going to be mean and nasty no matter what, then do you really want them in your life? And it doesn't matter if you're related to them or not. Do you really want them in your life? But the first thing you do is you spend time improving the relationship, improving your beliefs, improving your rules and your expectations for how you think it has to go. And, using a lot more flexibility. And when you do that, you're going to find yourself feeling more empowered, feeling more confident, and feeling much more in control. Okay, so when we focus on these rules that we have, then we can upgrade them, and it's going to make you feel a lot more powerful, a lot more confident, and a lot more in control. Remember, you don't have to respond just automatically. There was this farmer, and he was heard a ruckus, and he went outside, and he noticed part of his fence was broke down, and some of his best horses had escaped. They ran away, and the neighbor happened to be over there, and the neighbor said, "Oh, that's bad." And the wise farmer said, "Huh? Well, how do you know?" And so later on that afternoon, the farmer heard another ruckus, and he came back, and he saw that all his horses had returned, and they brought all these wild mares with them. So now he had more horses. It improved his wealth. And the neighbor was there, and the neighbor said, "Oh, that's good." And the farmer said, "Well, how do you know?" So the next day, the farmer's son was trying to tame one of these wild horses, and it bucked him off, and he broke his leg. And of course the neighbor was there, and he said, "Oh, that's bad." And the wise farmer said, "How do you know?" Right? And then a week later, the army was coming through, and they were taking all the firstborn sons to fight this war. And he, of course, didn't want his son to go, and his son could not go because he had a broken leg. And the neighbor's like, "Oh, that's good." And the farmer's like, "Well, how do you know?" Right? It just goes on and on. What looks good might be bad. What looks bad might be good. Instead of the words good and bad, let's just think of useful and unuseful, right? Instead of words like positive and negative, right or wrong, let's just look at what's useful and unuseful. And instead of making a quick assumption or judgment, you might just ask yourself, well, how do you know? Let's just learn from this situation. Let's see what we can learn from it. And as we decide to learn from it and get intentional, it's amazing what can happen as a result. So take some time and imagine yourself in different situations, responding in a way that will leave you and the other person feeling more validated and empowered. And then really pay attention to these rules that you're walking around telling yourself that you have to have, right? These rules like, if things don't go the way that I think they should go, then how am I responding, right? And what are these rules that I have, right? So if I have a rule that I have to get these 5 things done, or I'm not going to be happy. If I have a rule that I have to have, 30 private clients this week, or I have to feel scared, do you have to? I mean, I've had weeks where I didn't have any clients, and I wasn't scared. Right? I chose not to have any clients, or it might have been a Christmas break and I was fine. I was peaceful. I was focused on, well, if I have this free time, well, what can I do then? Hey, would you like more free tips on how to be a mesmerizing leader? Then check out mesmerizingleadership.com, and also hang out with me on Facebook, facebook.com/Tim Shurr. Thanks so much, and make your day a sure success.